Well, hello, everyone. My name is Ken Carter, and I serve as the resident bishop of the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church. I want to thank Reverend Amy Coles and Greg Huffman, our chancellor. They'll introduce our guests. Thank you, who will be leading us as well. I want to thank those of you on this webinar for your leadership in the church, for your compassion for our neighbors, and for your faith and trust in Jesus Christ. I want to acknowledge that this is not an interruption in our mission, which is to be in mission with Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. In these days, it is one of the more important ways we live out that mission, and I'm grateful for an opportunity to learn this evening. We're about the mission of Jesus Christ. And I wanted to just read a few of his words, and these will be from Matthew chapters 5, 22, and 25. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. Hear the great commandments. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all of the law and the prophets. And a last word from Jesus. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. Thank you all for being a part of this evening.
Hi, I'm Amy Coles. I serve as Bishop Carter's assistant, and we are glad that you all have joined. We are recording this so that we can share it with others who were not able to be with us, and we thank Jeremy for allowing us to do that. We do have things enabled so that we can have things translated, have translated interpretation. And so, Dara, can I ask you to share that in Spanish? And there's a button on the bottom of the screen that they would just click to join that.
Absolutely. Si alguien necesita que le traduzcamos todo lo que estamos hablando hoy, estoy aquí. Entonces, debe haber un botón en el fondo de su pantalla para que puedan utilizarlo y hablar entonces en español.
Gracias. And so let me open us with prayer, and then I will turn it over to Greg, who will introduce Jeremy to us. So let us pray. Almighty and gracious God, as we come seeking to be your servants, as we come seeking to welcome all of our siblings and all of our neighbors, we ask that you would give us open ears and open hearts to what's shared tonight, that we truly might be the kingdom people that you are calling us to be. We give you thanks for all those who are here, and especially for Dara and for Jeremy as they share with us, and for Greg for his work on behalf of our conference. So now guide us in all that we do. In Christ's name, amen. Now we'll turn it over to Greg.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, folks, for being here tonight. It is truly unfortunate times have blessed us with having one of the nation's foremost experts on immigration law here to speak with us tonight. Jeremy McKinney is somebody I've known for almost 30 years. We were law school classmates together. He's one of the few board certified immigration law specialists in North Carolina. He is the 76th president of the American Immigration Lawyers Association. That is a professional association of more than 17,000 immigration attorneys. He is a recognized expert in immigration law. He has testified in front of Congress on different occasions on different topics. He makes appearances on large media outlets like the New York Times, Washington Post, Rolling Stone, NBC News, CNN. He's listed in the best lawyers in America and super lawyers for immigration law. He's a graduate of Virginia Commonwealth University and received his doctorate at Campbell University. He's also, in addition to all that, is a veteran of the United States Army. He was a captain and trial counsel in the North Carolina Army National Guard and was deployed on several occasions during the Second Iraq War. He's also a United Methodist, which makes us doubly lucky to have him with us tonight. And we are equally lucky to have one of the attorneys from his office, Dara Arroyo Longoria. I am very thankful that they were able to give us their time. They're obviously very busy, but we really do appreciate it. And I'm going to turn this session over to Jeremy.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's great to be here. Great to see you, Greg. Greg and I graduated together. And what he failed to mention is we were in a band together. We played music together in law school. Greg is an excellent drummer, in addition to attorney. Joining me again is Dara Arroyo Longoria, a native of Puerto Rico, but now a North Carolinian and an amazing member of the North Carolina State Bar. She's been with me for a couple of years now, and we are blessed to have her with the law firm. Dara's here in case anyone wants anything answered in Spanish. This will be an English language presentation. But as Amy mentioned a moment ago, there is a service that provides auto translation. But again, feel free if there are any questions in Spanish. Dara is here to help. What I am going to open with are some remarks that I had prepared. So I will do my best to pretend like I'm not reading, but to be thorough and complete, I did prepare this in advance. And then we're going to leave plenty of time for your questions, including the ones that I received in advance. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. You all know this familiar verse, but what I'd like to do for a moment is pause and reflect on what it really means in the context of our government. What Caesar is due is not unlimited. Our nation was founded on the principle of limited government, where the Constitution guarantees us protections like the free exercise of religion, freedom from unreasonable searches and seizures, and the right to remain silent. Tonight, I want to talk about how those rights apply when it comes to ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and what you as clergy need to know about their power to arrest and search within your churches. Now, from 2011 all the way up until January 20th of 2025, the Department of Homeland Security, or DHS, had a policy limiting ICE enforcement actions at so-called sensitive places. such as schools, hospitals, and churches. This policy restricted arrests, interviews, searches, and surveillance in these spaces. Within hours of the 47th president taking office, this policy was rescinded. What does that mean? That means that ICE agents no longer have official internal guidelines stopping them from conducting enforcement in churches. But, and this is why I'm here tonight, that does not mean that they can do whatever they want. So let's jump into the law. Again, and I think this may be, for those of you that read the New York Times, I would encourage you to look at an op-ed that was posted on Sunday by the columnist Ezra Klein. It's called "Don't Believe Him." And to sum it all up into one thing, and again, this is not a political speech, and I don't really have any interest in partisan politics, but the concept is, I really need us all, and I'm talking to myself as well, to avoid the shiny objects. There's a lot of stuff that's going out as a fire hose of outrage media every day. Its intent is to give the perception that the executive branch has more powers than the law actually extends to it. We have already seen that in the example of birthright citizenship. That is a right that is enshrined in the Constitution, that was put in the Constitution to ensure that those that were previously slaves, that it was 100% known that they were U.S. citizens. That phrase was interpreted by the U.S. Constitution in the 1880s to apply to a child that was born in the United States of people that did not have permanent permission to be in the United States and were not U.S. citizens. What the Supreme Court made clear in that case is that the phrase and the exception subject to the jurisdiction thereof provides a very limited exception for diplomats, because diplomats exercise what is called diplomatic immunity. And so, for example, a diplomat may not be subject to criminal prosecution in the United States, for example, due to diplomatic immunity. That's why that phrase is in the Constitution, so that their children of diplomats who are not necessarily subject to the jurisdiction of the United States would not be considered citizens. Very, very limited exception. The Trump administration attempted on its first day to revise the definition of birthright citizenship and really limit it. By the way, limit it so that even individuals like Kamala Harris would no longer be considered U.S. citizens under that definition. Patently ridiculous, as a Reagan-appointed federal judge said 72 hours later. So my point to you is that the system is holding. The system is holding. We all have legal rights. We all have constitutional rights, and we need to exercise those rights. That is the check and balance. Right now, Congress may not be a meaningful check on this president, but that doesn't mean we as private citizens cannot be. And so I just wanted to start off with that reminder. Now, under this new policy, ICE agents can legally enter public areas without permission. This could, that does not mean would. This could include your sanctuary during Sunday service or a church event that is open to the public. Now, I would consider that to be a gray area because the only North Carolina judicial case I could find on it was one where a member of the clergy had given the government permission to search the church, and therefore the court did not have to go into whether the church was a public space or not a public space. So the law in North Carolina, not really resolved. North Carolina state statutes doesn't really resolve the issue either. But the law of many, many other states makes clear that a church is a private space and is not considered a public accommodation. But for the moment, I think it would be safe to assume that if anyone from the general public is free to enter your space, to go into the sanctuary for an 11 o'clock worship service, to walk into the fellowship hall for a public gathering, that at that moment, that space may be considered a public space. So I think if we just proceed with that as an assumption for the moment, that doesn't mean we're waiving that argument by any means in the future, but I think that it would be cautious for us to just make that assumption for the moment, that spaces that are open for the public are public areas for that limited duration that they are open to the public. ICE cannot enter private areas like your church offices, your break rooms, or any spaces not open to the public. They cannot enter those private areas without your permission or a judicial warrant. I'm going to share my screen in a moment and provide an illustration of what a judicial warrant looks like. Now, permission. Let's be perfectly clear. If you say it's okay, that's it. If you say it's okay, that is it. ICE has permission to enter and search your space. I would strongly encourage you to not grant permission of any government agent unless there is an emergency or an ongoing crime to enter a space and be able to question and search your church. Now, a court order will have a header that says something like United States District Court. It will have the name and address of the person that they want to seize, and it will be signed by a judicial officer, not an ICE agent. Now, if ICE agents are in a public space or have the proper authority to enter a private space, they can make arrests if they have probable cause or an administrative warrant. Now, your rights and the rights of your congregants, whether you are in a public space or a private space, everyone approached by ICE has the constitutional right to remain silent. Understand, the Constitution uses the word person. It does not use the word citizen or resident or someone in the United States present with authorization. It uses the word person. And unless we're going to revisit Dred Scott again, we're all people. So everyone has the constitutional right to remain silent. Number two, I would encourage you not to sign anything. Encourage congregants to never sign any documents unless they fully understand them. ICE may present forms that waive their right to a hearing before a judge. Now, sometimes you will get either from lay people, non-attorneys, you will hear about a rule that allows DHS to search certain areas without any warrant. I want to make clear what the law is. There is a federal rule that allows only Customs and Border Protection, that's CBP, the airport people, to search buses, trains, boats, and aircraft within 100 miles of a border, that's any land border or sea border, without a warrant. Now, that's the key. That does not apply to homes. That does not apply to churches. They cannot search your church under this rule.
While he's back, you were asking about what constitutes agreeing to ICE. Was that the question we had earlier?
Yes, what counts as being able to give, who counts as being able to give permission for ICE to enter a private church area? Just the senior pastor or any church member?
As far as I understand, it would be any church member. But again, we will triple check with Jeremy as soon as he's back. And I did see comments about the bandwidth. Would it help if we turn our videos off or if he turns his videos off? Like we can do that if that would help him be able to be on, but I'm not sure if he would need to be the one to turn that off.
I think they may have been referring to him turning his video off.
Okay. I apologize again. I'm back. All right. If ICE shows up at your church, ask if they have a judicial warrant signed by a judge. If they don't, you are not required to let them into areas that are not considered public areas. And no matter what, everyone has the right to remain silent. Now, I'm going to be sharing what we provide to anyone that asks about how to prepare for an emergency, an immigration emergency, because for anyone that's not a citizen of the United States or has loved ones that currently don't have legal status in this country, it's important to prepare for some type of immigration emergency when it's not an emergency. So let me go through that. What we tell people is, number one, remain calm and do not lie. Do not lie. Number two, we tell individuals to obtain and carry at all times photo identification. Now, that can be different things. It could be a passport. It could be a consular card. In cities like Greensboro, nonprofit organizations like Faith Action provide identification cards for individuals. Those Faith Action cards are recognized as valid identification in many places, including by our local law enforcement. But it's important to obtain photo identification. The Supreme Court has made clear that individuals do not have the right to suppress their identity. And so if there is a traffic stop, for example, a person should have photo identification, even if that person does not have a valid license. It is completely lawful for a law enforcement officer to ask for ID. We all know this, or at least the ones of us that have ever been stopped for a traffic stop know that we're immediately asked for license and registration. You do not have a right to suppress your identity. In addition, we tell individuals, do not carry any false identification or false documents on your person or in your vehicle. Because this administration has expanded what's called expedited removal to all areas within the United States, it's important for individuals to be able to document, number one, their immigration status, and number two, if they don't have any immigration status, that they've been in the United States for at least 2 years. We encourage individuals to keep that evidence. That could be, for example, a child's birth certificate or something that has their name on it that shows they've been in the United States for at least 2 years on their person, or make it readily available, like in your car. If we tell individuals that if you have a lawyer, carry that attorney's card with you at all times and exercise, again, your right to remain silent. This especially includes where you were born or how you arrived in the United States. I want to repeat again, do not sign anything unless you understand what you're signing. We tell individuals to develop a folder of documents that show the equities in their case, that they have U.S. citizen or resident relatives, that those, how long they've been in the United States, the absence of any criminal record, any documentation of any disability or medical condition of a loved one, and then keep that folder of documents with a trusted family member or friend who has lawful status in the United States, so that if there is an arrest and the person is eligible for release, that folder can get into an immigration attorney's hands, and we can get that bond motion filed and hopefully get that loved one out. We tell people if there is any criminal record, get the papers. You want to know accurately and completely what, if anything, that person has ever been charged with and what they've been convicted of. And if the records have been destroyed, get a letter saying that the record has been destroyed. Again, this is what to do when it's not an immigration emergency. These are the kinds of things that we have to do when someone is suddenly arrested and we lose valuable time. So you want to do it when it's not an emergency. We have clients, fathers, whose names are not on their children's birth certificate. That, in those cases, we strongly encourage those individuals to get the birth certificates amended. Often that does provide a need for identification. Again, a passport is identification. And by the way, holding a passport from another country does not mean that you are conceding that you are not a citizen of the United States. I know plenty of people that are citizens of more than one country. A member of my staff is Brazilian and a U.S. citizen. She is a citizen of both countries. So you can use your passport as identification, especially if you need to get that birth certificate amended. If you have minor children, figure out where the children will stay if you are suddenly detained. You may want to sign a legal document like a power of attorney. However, you should not sign any legal document like a power of attorney without first speaking to an attorney. A power of attorney can be abused, and that person can be financially crippled with a vast power of attorney if put into the wrong hands. So that's a very delicate document. It should be used with care. And so that's what we tell individuals how to prepare for an immigration emergency so that they will be ready. But at the end of the day, there are people out there that have legal pathways to pursue. I would encourage anyone that can to have a consultation with a qualified attorney and have that individual and confidential conversation to see if something can be done. Disclaimer: our immigration laws are horrible. There has not been any positive immigration reform since 1990. In 1996, Congress passed a very draconian bill. And by the way, speaking of immigration is nonpartisan, that 1996 law was passed by a Republican Congress and signed into law by a Democrat president. So I want to be clear that when it comes to immigration, there is no such thing as Democrat or Republican. It is much more complicated than that. But we haven't had any positive changes in decades. There have been attempts by Republicans such as George W. Bush and Democrats such as Barack Obama, but those attempts failed both times. And so what that has left with is millions of people that have been cast into the shadows, the vast majority of whom have never broken the law. Let's talk about this term illegal for a second. if a person being in the United States without permission is not a violation of the criminal law. It is not a crime. It is potentially a civil violation, an immigration violation. That is a set of civil laws. If a person crosses into the United States without inspection, sneaks across the border, that is a misdemeanor. If a person enters the United States on a visa and overstays that visa, that is not a crime at all, not even a misdemeanor. So let's be clear that if we're calling anyone illegal, how do we define that? Do we define that as someone that's been convicted of a felony, for example? Not sure. My point is that no human is illegal. A person may not have permission to be in this country, and that could ultimately result in a consequence. And that consequence could ultimately be deportation, but not before that person has a right to be heard. And so that's important to understand. I do think that if ICE starts to use its new power to enter churches, I do think there is a legitimate question as to whether that constitutes a violation of the free exercise of religion, another right that is protected and extended to all persons in this country. And so we will be pursuing that vigorously if that ever comes up. But again, going right back to where we started, ICE generally is going to need a judicial warrant signed by a judicial official to enter and search a space. But in any event, everyone has the right to remain silent. All right. So again, I'm going to send samples of what a ICE administrative warrant looks like and what a judicial warrant looks like. I'm going to send the Know Your Rights PDF in English and Spanish. We've already shared a list of nonprofit organizations with the conference, and so hopefully that will be also provided to you. Unfortunately, there has been an attack on the funding sources of many nonprofits, and that is going to impact and further disable the capacity of many nonprofit providers. That's just something else that our communities are going to have to deal with. That's going to be an area that requires support from folks like yourselves. And so we need to lift up our community organizations, our community partnerships. I've been a United Methodist member since 2002. Before that, I was a Baptist, independent Baptist, in Virginia, where I'm from. And I was a member of Grace United Methodist Church in Greensboro. And I reached out to Pastor Drew McIntyre, who is doing a book study tonight and couldn't be with us, and asked if this was going to be recorded. And I told him it would be. But he provided me with some reminders of what Grace has done over the years to partner with immigrant communities. And I think it's really a great learning lesson, because I'll be honest, the membership of Grace United Methodist it's a great mix of people throughout the Triad region of North Carolina, but there are not many immigrants. There are not many immigrants at Grace United Methodist Church, but that has not stopped them from reaching out and doing what they can to help our local immigrant communities. So many years, and my Sunday school class was involved with this, we sponsored a refugee family, and we partnered with them as they were being resettled into Greensboro. Members of Grace United Methodist Church were at the airport to literally meet them as they got off the plane. They later named one of their kids Grace. For over a decade, Grace United Methodist has partnered with Learning Together, which gives immigrant mothers free childcare 3 times a week during the school year while they learn English, cultural literacy, and build community with other mothers. Various events with Faith Action International, including food drives, backpack drives, and hosting Know Your Rights seminars and ID drives. Remember, Faith Action produces its own ID. Grace has hosted large events for Church World Service, including staff trainings and celebrations, as well as supporting individual refugee families. Those are just a few examples of how your church can get involved to lift up our immigrant communities. I want to go into some of the questions that were provided in advance. Okay, so this is a very, we get questions like this all the time. Wondering how to help a friend who is Mexican and has been in the United States for almost 20 years but has no legal status. By the way, the average undocumented migrant at this point has been in the United States for 18 years. That's the average. But has no legal status. Complicated by raising a daughter who was born here and is now in high school. Would you have any advice? Yes. That person should have a consultation, whether it's with a nonprofit or a private attorney, to see if there are any options. It is very complicated, and there may not be any options, but leaving a consultation, the person will know exactly what needs to change in the law if in order to gain legal status. The person may find that they're eligible to seek some type of legal status that they did not know about. And perhaps most importantly, learn if they have any defense to deportation if they are placed into removal proceedings. For example, there is a form of removal relief called cancellation of removal. Generally speaking, a person has to prove they've been here for 10 years. They've been a person of good moral character during that time. They do not have any disqualifying criminal record, and they're U.S. citizen or permanent resident, parent, spouse, and or children would suffer exceptional and extremely unusual hardship. Now, that is extremely difficult relief to seek, but it's relief to seek. Taking advantage of all of that person's opportunities to be heard. And that includes a right to a full and fair hearing before an immigration judge, as well as an appeal to the Board of Immigration Appeals. And so that type of thing lately can take years to go through. And there's a simple reason for that. Our immigration court system has never had the docket that it has now. When I started in leadership in AILA, the immigration court docket was about 600,000. And I will tell you, at the time, we were freaking out about it because cases were taking too long. The docket now is about 3 million. 3 million. There are a couple of reasons for that. Number one was the rescission in 2017 of enforcement priorities. So, for example, the Biden administration has had 3 very simple enforcement priorities in effect over the last 4 years. Number one, if you're a national security threat, a terrorist, a potential security risk, you are the highest priority. Number two, a public safety risk. So individuals that have been convicted of drunk driving, selling drugs, etc., domestic abusers, those are considered priorities for deportation. And then number three, recent arrivals. the Biden administration said, if you cross the border after November of 2020, we are going to put you at the front of this immigration court line because we are trying not to encourage people to just try to sneak across the border. That was one of the many things the Biden administration attempted to do to ebb the flow of irregular migration across the southern border. Now, in 2017, the first Trump administration said, no, if you have an encounter with ICE, we are going to enforce your deportation. It doesn't matter if you're a grandma or you're a murderer. It doesn't matter whether you're a bricklayer or Osama bin Laden. We are going to process you equally in immigration court. And what that resulted in was a doubling of the immigration court docket. It went from about 600,000 to about 1.5 million during that time. Then COVID hit. That added on, courts were not operating for many months, and that added on to the immigration court's backlog. Now we're in a situation where then we had a lot of individuals that met the Biden administration's enforcement priorities that had entered from the southern border. That increased the docket, and now the Trump administration on January 20th rescinded the Biden enforcement priorities. So we are back to everyone's a priority. And of course, if everyone's a priority, no one is. And so that, again, we're in a situation where it could be a low-level traffic offense or it could be murder, and you will be enforced and use the same resources from ICE. It is a waste of taxpayer money, in my opinion. But that's the situation that we're dealing with on the ground right now. So that friend that is Mexican, I would say get a consultation with an immigration attorney. And number two, pay close attention to preparing for an immigration emergency, especially the part about developing a folder of evidence to demonstrate that the person's been here for 20 years and has a U.S. citizen child. What can or should we do if ICE wants to come in and check immigration status during our ESOL classes? Okay, now a school space is not a public space. A school space is not a public space. The only people that have permission to enter a space, a school space, are the students and the faculty at that space. That is a private space. That means that ICE cannot enter a private space without a judicial warrant signed by a judicial official.
Jeremy, there look like it just in the chat. There are a lot of probably clergy questions about the status of the sanctuary, public versus private, and maybe what you might be able to do just by putting up signs and stuff like that to try to kind of make it more of a private space or have the argument that it's a private space.
Yeah, I'm not sure that if ICE wants to enter a space where, let me ask this, and this may be of the conference leadership. I'm assuming that at the United Methodist Church that worship is extended to all. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And I'm assuming that a sign on a door is not going to change the fact that if I walk into a sanctuary at 11 a.m. on a Sunday, that is going to that I need a special invitation to enter.
You're correct. You wouldn't.
I think that a sign provides more powerful evidence that it's a private space. And of course, the building is private. The building is absolutely private. But just like the waiting room at my law office, an ICE agent could enter my waiting room, but they couldn't go any further than that. An ICE agent can walk into a school office just like anyone off the street, but they can't enter any school space. So I think we should be careful in that. I think that it would, of course, be incumbent upon the pastoral leadership to assert that this is a private space and that they are not permitted to enter without a judicial warrant signed by a judicial officer. I just want to premise that. I just want to, again, just provide a disclaimer that they may make the argument that it's a public space open to anyone and that they are there searching for a specific person that they believe is in attendance at the time. Now, that doesn't mean, that means that I would exercise my right to remain silent and except for also asserting that they shouldn't be there. But at the end of the day, if they choose to remain in that space and search for that individual or arrest that individual, then that's going to be something that will have to be handled through subsequent litigation after the fact. And of course, in the arena of public opinion, because that type of abuse, if that were to happen, I can't imagine would be tolerated by the vast majority of American voters. Again, if we see that type of overreach, there's going to be consequences, at a minimum political consequences, but I also believe there'll be legal consequences to pay. If they take that overreach, you might end up with case law that says a sanctuary is not a public accommodation, a private space where they do not have permission to go. And they're well aware of that as well. So again, going back to the op-ed I referred to at the beginning from Ezra Klein, don't believe them. Don't believe them. They are saying these things so that you will consent. So that you will consent. Remember, if immigration enforcement is asking if they can come in, then they don't have permission to come in. If they had permission to come in, they would not ask.
Right. And they know they don't.
Right. Exactly. And so look, there have already been I have not heard of an example of a church yet. And we're talking about since over the last 2 weeks, right? So we haven't had a lot of time yet. But there have already been examples of schools, not locally, but schools. And so, and in those examples, the school administrations in Chicago is what I'm pointing to specifically, did not permit ICE to enter any student area. They made it to the office and that's as far as they got because they don't have permission to enter those spaces. And they respected that and they left. The point is that ICE officers are law enforcement officers. Again, we give onto Caesar what is Caesar's, right? They have legal powers. If they have an administrative warrant to arrest a specific person and they encounter and arrest that specific person, they are not violating the law. The point is that can they go into your sacred spaces and search for that individual? And the answer should be no. The answer should be no. And if they push it, they're I think attempting an enormous overreach for which there are going to be legal consequences and political consequences.
So let's just say they do. Say they say it's a private space or space that some
Is that Greg or is it me?
It's Greg.
Yay. Okay, I'm just going to go with if they do, if they do, and they don't leave, everyone needs to exercise their right to remain silent. And by the way, if anyone with the authority to do so gives permission for ICE to search, then they can search and they can do so lawfully. Again, these ICE agents,
But
and
it's
let me,
okay.
I'm sorry. Greg, you've been frozen for a bit, so I don't know if
Sorry. I have a bad connection tonight. I am out of town in a hotel. Have a hotel. Ugh. But it's okay to tell them, you shouldn't be here. This is a private space.
Yes, there's nothing wrong with that.
But the one thing you never do under any circumstances, try to physically
Okay, I'm
obstruct.
assuming you physically obstruct. No. No, do not physically obstruct a law enforcement officer. Again, the legal question will be whether that person was exercising their powers lawfully. But do you really want to find that out when you're charged with a crime? And, that will be a legal issue at the criminal trial, whether the officer was properly discharging his or her lawful duties. I don't want to find out like that. I would not physically obstruct anyone, but I would assert that those agents do not have the right to be at that space. And by the way, if a worship service is not going on or an activity is not going on, there's no question that it's a private space. That's not even an issue.
Jeremy,
Yes.
earlier I was asked who can give an ICE agent permission, and I wasn't sure. So I just
No, I think that's fair. That would need to be, again, within the church, someone that has the legal authority to give that permission. Now, I will admit, I was not on church council long enough to know the ins and outs of how it works in the United Methodist Church. So I don't know if a lay leader could provide that permission or not. I would assume that it would be someone on the pastoral staff. Greg, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that question.
I'm going to turn my video off, hoping that will help some.
Yeah.
I've always viewed this as kind of a danger area for churches, because most churches are going to have greeters at some point and ushers that like to welcome people in, and they don't like to tell people that they can't come in. I think if a church was going to undergo some planning and training for an ICE encounter, one of the things they might want to talk to those ushers and greeters about is, if they're ICE officers, tell them they can't come in, they're not welcome. Maybe think about that. But if you're talking about who strictly would have legal authority to give consent for the church, I think it would be, a trustee. It would be, it would definitely be one of the clergy, and anyone else who arguably had some sort of authority at the church, whether it's a treasurer or someone like that. I don't think it would just be any member in general, but it's always troubled me that really does kind of, that having greeters and ushers who aren't trained on what to do if ICE shows up might actually kind of foment a situation or create a situation where ICE would come in because they thought they had permission.
Okay. I think that Sarah's comment is spot on. Let's have clear communication amongst your lay leadership, your trustees, your staff, that there is a designated point person to have that conversation.
I'll go ahead and answer some questions I've seen in the chat. I'm sorry about my cat and my dog, by the way. I did see a question about the status of DACA. Right now, DACA is still in place. That means deferred action for childhood arrivals. So people with DACA are still able to renew their protection at this time. We haven't heard any news on that front yet. You're
Is Elon Musk on? A parking lot's a public space, okay? And so if they want to sit in the parking lot, not a whole lot that can be done about that. And so now, again, I have a hard time seeing ICE agents, which again, I've do removal defense. I've been doing removal defense since the late 90s. I don't want to demonize anyone. I don't want to demonize the immigrant population, but I also don't want to largely demonize ICE. Most of the vast majority of ICE agents that I've met are lawful, law-abiding individuals that are following the law and are not going to abuse the system. That does not mean that there aren't bad apples, because as we know that those can be bad apples in any type of crowd. But generally speaking, ICE is not going, in my view, not going to push this policy, but that doesn't mean we don't plan. That doesn't mean we don't plan for it. What we tell people, for example, in homes, if there's a family, lots of people in the house that are undocumented, but there's one person in that house that has a valid order of deportation outstanding against them, ICE has the right to just sit out there and wait. And if that were to happen, we tell them, of course, don't let ICE into the house, don't answer any questions. But ultimately, if they gain permission to go into the house, they are going to interrogate everyone there and potentially arrest anyone in that house that is lacking immigration status. So sometimes the best policy might be for that person that they are targeting to leave the house for the protection of everyone else in the home. Those are very hard conversations to have. I haven't had to have those conversations since the last Trump administration, but we're getting ready to have those conversations again. I would not apply that analogy to a church because, again, there are many people there of all different stripes, all different types of immigration and citizenship status. And I would not apply that to the church specific church situation. Okay. Man, so many good questions. Driving without a license ticket equal criminal activity? If you ask this administration, yes, because they consider any violation of the law to be someone with a criminal record. They're making no distinction between violent crimes and non-violent crimes. And by the way, driving without a license in North Carolina is a misdemeanor, so it is a crime. Many types of speeding are infractions. Those are not crimes. They're not misdemeanors. They're not felonies. And the difference between the two is that for an infraction, you can't go to jail. You can be fined, but you can't go to jail. With a misdemeanor, even the lowest level misdemeanor, you technically could go to jail. Jan is saying, what if a pastor's not present? Can responsible lay leader make the statement? Again, planning and communication. Let's have those conversations when it's not an emergency and designate that person so that if you know the pastor is not going to be there at a specific time, then we know that the associate pastor or a lay leader or the church secretary is the designated point person to speak to ICE. ICE is, yes, ICE wears, they are required to wear identifying clothing when showing up at a location. Sometimes, however, just to be clear, it does not say ICE. Sometimes it says police, which is very misleading, but they are still identifying themselves as law enforcement and should be treated as such. Can ICE arrest a pastor or someone else who has harbored someone? Potentially, again, that would, I would consider that to be a gross abuse of power. But you know, if you ask me,
So I'll go ahead and answer the second part of that question until he comes back on, and that is the part of the question that says, would the conference protect or would the pastor be supported, like would their appointment be protected? And certainly we would work through that. We've also spoken with the district superintendents about seeing as to whether there's some lawyers or counsel that would provide free support, pro bono support to pastors that were in that situation. So certainly if that were to happen, you'd want to contact your district superintendent, and then we would work with you from there. Jeremy, I answered the second part of the question. I'll let you finish the first.
great. Well, I was on Megan's, wouldn't a judicial warrant only give criminal law enforcement, like the police, the authority to enter a private space? No, a judicial officer can give ICE permission to enter a private space. I also, just with that, I want to lift up the Guilford County Sheriff, Danny Rogers, who made it clear that for examples like requests to detain someone, our sheriff is not going to honor requests. He will honor commands from judicial officers. As Sheriff Rogers said, there is a federal courthouse right across the street from the sheriff's department. And so it is super easy to go and get proper and legal permission to take these actions. We share space with a Presbyterian congregation. Should the pastor, still be the only one to give permission to enter? I think that getting guidance from the conference would be a great idea, but again, I just think advanced planning is in order. It may be impossible for only one person to be the designated person, but it also requires general education. You know, Sarah says anyone can deny entry, just don't open the door. And
Foiled again.
Greg, I'll pass this question to you if you're willing, or Dara. Are food pantries public spaces?
If they are open to the general public, then I think yes. If they are only open to a more limited class of service recipients, then I would say no. For example, if it's only open to the homeless, I would say that you have an argument at that point that it's private. But again, I think that's probably once you start to parse it out at that level of detail, you're getting into kind of these gray areas that really haven't been litigated. This is the one I want Jeremy to answer. Is it okay to, he's back. So there's a question, Jeremy. Is it okay to videotape an encounter with ICE agents?
Yes. Yes, perfectly okay.
Even though they tell you to stop, you can still do it, right?
Yes, of course. Yes, there's no. I mean, they can ask you to stop. I mean, they could even put it so that it seems like a directive, but that's not a lawful order. You know, and again, having putting shedding light in these spaces is what we need. That's what we need. I want to be clear that to give the appearance of being tough, this administration right now is going after primarily people that have already outstanding removal orders. There are many people that have already gone through the system or for whatever reason, good or bad, didn't go to court and they have an outstanding deportation order. There are people that have gone through the system and lost, but have been granted stays. So they have temporary permission to be here. There are people that have been here for years, especially our Vietnamese neighbors, because Vietnam for decades has not permitted deportations to their country. Those individuals that don't have to go in front of the immigration court are the highest priority for the border czar, Tom Homan, and this new administration, because they're the easiest to rack up numbers. If they can grab those individuals and deport them, they will build up numbers. And so that's exactly what you are seeing right now with these ICE operations. And they don't care if the individuals have criminal records or not. They're just grabbing the ones that have already gone through the system and then deporting them so that they can say, hey, we deported more people than President Biden. That's what's happening right now. So one part of our job is to educate, inform people, but I also think that it's important for us not to overly scare our immigrant communities. We need to keep it real. So, for example, generally speaking, if you've already gone through the system, then there's a high chance that you could have an encounter with ICE. And then the second biggest way is if you have an encounter with regular law enforcement. Classic example, if you were pulled over for driving without a license and you don't have ID on you, if you were pulled over for anything properly and you don't have identification, you are going to be arrested and you're going to go to the police station. If there is an encounter at a police station that cooperates with ICE, then that's where that encounter is going to happen. And so that is the second biggest way that people end up in the immigration system. Then the third is through these work raids, not church raids, work raids. And that's where they'll go to like a poultry plant or something that has lots of typically undocumented workers, and they'll conduct a big splashy raid, often with the permission of the company who are trying to stay out of jail or being fined excessively themselves. And so that's really the third space where that happens. So for most individuals, it's going to be okay. We just got to get through the worst of this. I believe this administration will go through a very dark period of overreach, just like it did last time. And then the system will correct. The system will correct and we'll get back to not a humane set of immigration laws, but perhaps one that's more consistent with due process, that gives people a fighting chance. With that said, the next question on the list was, what is refoulement? Refoulement is when you return someone to a country where you know that they are going to be persecuted or tortured. And so every country, well, I should say every major industrial country, including the United States, a basic international convention is one of non-refoulement. You do not return individuals to places where they will be subjected to torture or persecution. That's a basic of asylum and refugee law. So often what Dara and our hearings are about is whether a person will be subjected to persecution or torture if they are returned. Because if we can establish that, then they won't be deported. The next question was about a summer reading literacy initiative program. That is not a public space. That is a private space. ICE does not have permission to enter that space. Again, with the school, head of school of Keystone Montessori, not a, that is not a public area, that is a private space. What can we do to protect undocumented friends? Again, education, really let everyone know their rights. Recently, I saw the border czar, Tom Homan, complaining that too many people were being informed of their rights. That means that something we're doing out there is working. Because if they
While the internet does not cooperate again, in the chat, Santosh asked a interesting question. Can ICE enter a church during Sunday service without giving specific names, meaning for whom they may be searching? And the answer to that is yes. You get into the difference between an actual arrest warrant for a specific person and a search warrant, which is searching for a class of people, meaning undocumented people or evidence of them. So the answer to that's yes. And Dara may be able to help out with this one. But Jeremy was talking about going into a private space with a judicial warrant, but detaining someone or arresting them with an administrative warrant. And that gets back to the two different kinds of warrants and how they're used. And I don't know if you can kind of explain that, those mechanics.
Yeah, an administrative warrant is
You're up, Dara.
My dog is barking, but yes, an administrative warrant would be the one that ICE would have to, for example, detain someone. So if someone has a removal order or a deportation order, then there would be an administrative warrant to pick up that person. A judicial warrant would be different in that sense. It would be more about the searches themselves, but when it comes to removal proceedings, all they need is an administrative warrant. And I'm going to mute myself. I'm so sorry.
And those are two totally different kinds of warrants coming out of two totally different kinds of court contexts. So an administrative warrant will say up at the top that it's issued by DHS. And that's part of a civil removal action or a civil enforcement action. The judicial warrant is issued by a United States District Court, and that's part of a criminal case. Two totally different things.
what he said. I apologize about the Wi-Fi problems tonight. I really do. Let's see. So we've got about what, 10 minutes left?
Yes. About 10.
Okay. I'm going to continue looking through the questions. Cindy basically can deny entry into the church if ICE has permission to enter sanctuary with no judicial warrant. Yes, that is correct. All right.
So
Going
there
back.
are a couple questions about cars and church buses and whether they're private versus public.
They are, no, they are private, but they're subject to, they're not subject to a stop pursuant to an administrative warrant. Again, I invoked a moment ago a CBP rule, but ICE is not CBP. CBP is Customs and Border Protection. ICE is Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Now, with cooperation of law enforcement, you can have checkpoints. That's where you really get into some Big Brother stuff. You see that already near the southern border. You see these checkpoints. We don't really see those here, but we have in the past. And again, as long as local law enforcement is treating everyone equally, regardless of the color of your skin or whether you have an accent or not, then that may be considered to be lawful. But I don't see a situation where ICE is trying to seize a church bus.
So Jeremy, there are several questions about, and I think it's just folks are trying to absorb all this, everything. So can they restrict ICE officials' entry on Sunday morning or not? And I'm not, as I've listened, I'm not sure there's a clear answer to that, but it's
Well,
clear.
just to be, and I'm with you because I said that the area of law was gray, but your answer does not. If they are asking, they are seeking permission, and that permission should not be granted. So if they are asking, do not grant permission. If they are not asking, then they are taking the legal position that a space that is open to the general public at a specific time is a public space, and they have the right to be in a public space. That will need to be litigated. My point is, you do not waive the argument by giving them permission. Does that make sense, Amy?
Absolutely, yes. And I think
Okay.
that helps clear it up. Absolutely.
And then to follow up on that, whether or not they're asking to come in or whether you're telling them they can't come in, if they are hell-bent on going in, no matter what, don't physically stop them. You can just fine to tell them, hey, you shouldn't be doing this. This isn't right. But what you can't do is try to physically stop.
That's correct. That could be a violation of criminal law. We don't want that type of trouble. I would not encourage anyone to physically obstruct a law enforcement officer. ICE cannot interrupt our worship service, even though the worship service space is public, right? Taking on basically what Greg was just saying, if a ICE agent wanted to go into a service, treat it as a public space, and start questioning individuals or arresting someone in the middle of a worship service, good luck to that agent with that person's future career. I again, whether that's legal or not, I don't think it is. But there is sufficient ambiguity there that an argument could be made. And so there is no bright line answer. You know, again, at any continuing legal education course, the most common answer is maybe. But, you know, I certainly would not consent to that. I would not find it acceptable. I would object. But again, going to Greg's comment and good advice, I would not physically try to obstruct any law enforcement officer.
Yeah, that's a kind of a situation that you don't interfere with them and you let a court sort it out later.
Exactly. By the way, there's a question about obstruction of justice. Lawfully exercising your constitutional rights is not obstruction of justice. Exercising your right to remain silent is not obstruction of justice. Not providing permission for a law enforcement officer to search a private space is not obstruction of justice. And again, if there is an abuse of power, then it will be dealt with in subsequent litigation and in our political spaces. If there's an abuse like that, the media should absolutely know about it. And so, again, you know, thinking about this in advance, participating in things like this, getting information out to your members, all of that is really vital. And I also don't want to forget the example of Grace, which is also entering into partnerships and lifting up some of these immigrant communities at a time when they need it the most, where they need our love and they need our compassion. And they need, I would argue, the true word of Jesus Christ in their lives at this moment. That's really I think, our shared responsibility at this moment. Again, most ICE agents are law-abiding figures, and regardless of what administration it is, they're going to follow the immigration law. I think it's wise to be prepared. I do not expect widespread abuses from the rescission of the sensitive locations memo, but that doesn't mean that we aren't prepared. Figure out what to do. Make sure you do not give consent, and exercise your right to remain silent. Make sure your members understand they have a right to remain silent. And for those immigrant members and their loved ones and your partnerships and communities, make sure they know their rights. Make sure they know that they're a person and they have constitutional rights just like anyone else.
There have been a couple questions about temporary protected status and
Yes.
how help those folks.
Okay, so TPS or temporary protected status has been in place for areas of different types of catastrophes. They could be environmental, they could be from war, etc. We have it El Salvador, Honduras, Haiti, Venezuela, Sudan, Syria, etc., Ukraine. And those individuals are, as long as they don't have any felonies or no more than one misdemeanor, they are granted temporary permission to be in the United States and to work until the situation in their country improves. Recently, Kristi Noem, our new secretary, DHS secretary, rescinded the Biden administration's extension of Venezuelan TPS. And so that we're going to have to see if number one, that the secretary has the legal ability to do that. I'm sure there will be a lawsuit about it. We'll find out. But if the secretary could rescind that extension, that means that we're going to have I think it's about 300,000 or so Venezuelans suddenly be in the United States without status and subject to deportation. So certainly those individuals, if they have other legal means of immigrating or obtaining legal status, they should be pursuing that. We need to lift up our Venezuelan neighbors as much as we can. All right, so I'm out of time, but we'll be sharing the PDFs by email. And if there are any other questions, my email address will be also Dara's. If there are any questions in Spanish, Dara's available to answer those as well. I want to thank you for your time. And again, this conversation is just starting. It's not over.
So let me thank you, Jeremy, and also Dara and Greg, and let folks know that we do have your email addresses. We'll be getting that information out to you. We'll also do our best to post it on the conference website. And we know that a lot of information has been shared this evening. We are thankful for it. And we also know that we don't know all the answers. So let's continue to pay attention. Let's continue to please read things that your district superintendent or the conference sends out, as we're working to give you the best advice that we can. But for now, we invite you to have a good evening. We ask that God's peace go with you, and may we continue to share God's love with all of God's children. This we ask in the name of Christ. Have a great evening. Good night.